Good evening, folks, and welcome to Ridgecrest Talk. I'm Al Huey, I think, and along with Robert Ironman, and our special guest tonight is Mr. Chuck Griffin from the Indian Wells Valley Water District. Thanks for coming out.
Coming in, Chuck.
Appreciate
no
it, Chuck. So we're going to talk about firecrackers. No, we're going to talk about water.
Water, yeah. And yeah, we should preface this with, we understand that there are things that Chuck may not be able to say, talk about, because he's on the board of directors of the Indian Wells Valley Water District.
Right.
But
and what he does say is his own personal view.
Yeah, right. He's not representing the board of directors. And so maybe there'll just be some comments that Al and I have that might be rhetorical questions.
It is interesting, though, that we have approached other board members and nobody's willing to come on.
Huh, that is interesting.
Just interesting, I don't know.
Maybe just scheduling.
We have had Mr. Zadiba, though.
Yes.
Numerous times.
Yes, the general manager, Mr. Zadiba. And anything that we say tonight or that we discuss tonight, any other member of the board is welcome to come on. Mr. Zadiba is welcome to come on. Mr. Gleason's welcome to come on. Mayor Breeden's welcome to come on. We'll have any of them on that would like to say anything.
We have, I think, had both sides of this water issue on our program over the last year.
Yes.
We kind of lead in the direction that it's an open basin and that we have enough water that we're not in a crisis here. But unfortunately, I heard from someone today that contacted the Todd, the gal from the Todd report, and responded to an email whether it was time for another report, and I'm generalizing here because obviously I don't have it in front of me, and her response was that the local area, the GSA, should pursue numerous alternative opinions.
Well, I agree with that.
Or numerous opinions, not just base it off of the Todd report.
Yes.
In fact.
And she also said, I don't know if that was in this email or another one, but she was surprised that the Todd report was used in the way it was used. Excuse me.
Not only surprised, I think that disappointed, startled, in that she felt that it got used inappropriately.
Right.
Well, the Todd report was a compilation of data, and that's what it was used for, just to look at the old data that was already there, and then they made their best
But it was
assumption.
an incomplete report.
Correct.
It had data, but not all the data.
Not all the data.
Right.
I mean, a lot of Dr. Austin's data was excluded from that
Correct.
report.
Yes.
So,
And I tend to follow some of Dr. Austin's stuff. I mean, I believe we have an open basin. I think the first thing that needs to happen when the GSA is formed is we need to do more studies. The more studies we can do, we need to drill some wells. We need to find out for sure before we go to a lot of expensive measures how much water we have. And we need to put some stream gauges in. And let's see how much recharge we actually have, and let's record that data, and let's get some true information out. That's kind of what I think. And I would also like to see the very first thing that happens, and I don't know, this is just my thought on this, but I would like to see some type of a fallowing agreement worked out with the large alfalfa farmer to see if there was a way, hey, we could, as a GSA, we could all work together, we could pay the alfalfa farmer what his harvest would reap for that year or 2 years if he had to be off for 2 years to replant. But that would give us the additional 7,500 acre feet or so recharge. And then we could look at our well information and say, hey, we gained recharge or we didn't gain any recharge. And if we didn't gain any recharge, we're actually not depleting. It's just going down at the same rate no matter what we do. And that's kind of what my theory is it's went down since the early 1900s. On average, a foot a year, no matter how much water is used. And that's where my thought process comes from. If we could say, hey, let's stop the pumping for a year where it wouldn't affect the harvest because they could replant the following year and then reap a harvest again. That's something that I think could be beneficial. So we could say, hey, well, here's the data. We came up 6 inches, or we didn't come up at all, and it's still going down a foot a year with that 7,500 acre feet that we gained by not using any alfalfa watering. So,
well, where do you propose that we would get the money to do that?
well, it would have to come from the GSA, because that's who's going to regulate the groundwater in this basin.
But who is the GSA going to get the money from?
Have to come from
Well,
the state
it's going to
somehow.
have to come from the state, or it's going to have to come from grants, or it's going to have to come from participants in the GSA to say, hey, we would like to try some of these ideas, because ultimately the GSA is going to be there to regulate and be in charge. I mean, like it or not, the GSA is here to stay, and it's something that we've got to work with, and it's going to be a good thing. It's going to be a lot of work.
And I understand that you firmly believe that. I'm on the other side of that equation, in that I believe that the GSAs will be tied up in court so long that my grandchildren will have children before it gets out of the courts.
There will definitely be legal ramifications when a GSA is formed. And that's why I attended a law seminar recently on the GSA, on Sigma. Specifically, and that's what it talked about, was the inclusion of everybody that used in the valley, wherever you were at. In your basin, you wanted to include everybody right from the start.
Well, that brings up to me a problem that we have already, because in what I have assessed, they're not including everybody.
Well, at first, the public was not invited. In the last meeting they had, they made a change, and they invited the public, which I was very happy to see.
I agree, but there's a huge difference between inviting the public and all the people that should be having a seat at the table, having a seat at the table.
You're correct, but Sigma also states who can be at the table.
Yes.
Now, it has just signatories that can be there. It doesn't allow for like a business entity to be at the table, such as Searles Valley, which I have a great concern for Searles Valley, because I think they're going to be one of the ones that are affected the most.
Well,
by
they're
this.
going to have to be represented by San Bernardino County.
They are going to be represented by San Bernardino County, but
we have to take a break, unfortunately.
All right.
It's that time.
Yeah.
Got to pay the bills. So join us on the other side of the break. We'll be back with more with Mr. Chuck Griffin from the Water Board.
And welcome back to segment 2 of this evening's Ridgecrest Talk with Robert Ironman and Al Huey. And our special guest tonight is Mr. Chuck Griffin from the Indian Wells Valley Water Board. And believe it or not, we're talking wine, women, and song. I mean water. And so you had a question or something that you wanted to bring up?
Yeah, I wanted to talk about, in particular, one well. But Robert and I had an opportunity here recently to go look at a multitude of wells, and got information on many of them. And there's one well that impressed me that's out there in Inyokern. It's a ag well. It's 1,000 feet or better that it was drilled. And it has 750 feet of water standing. And our information tells us that it's only dropping a half of a foot a year.
Mm-hmm.
Now, do the math.
Well, a half a foot a year.
We're going to run out in a couple of years?
1,300.
1,300 years?
Yeah, actually 700 feet. So it's over 1,400 years before that well runs out. Now, I know that the Dr. Deckers of the world out there will say, oh, well, the water will go bad in it. There'll be too many contaminants in it, and it'll turn brackish, and it'll...
No, this well had good water.
Right. And so I'm not sure how to, because I'm not enough of a hydrologist to know the answer to that question. But let's talk about another well that owned by the Indian Wells Valley Water District.
Before we do that, Before we do that, I want to jump back a bit. Oh, this was probably a couple months ago at a water board meeting. They were discussing wanting to drill a new well for backup.
Correct. That was well 35.
And I think did that get tabled, or did it finally get approved?
No, I think it got passed to go through the WISA process. They're still working on everything right now with that. I did vote against that. I think that we have a great well, which is well 36, which is the one you were referencing on Ridgecrest Boulevard. I personally worked on that well. I was basically there 24 hours a day while that was being drilled, off and on with a few hours of sleep. But I think I talked about that well the last time I was on here. That well is a magnificent well, and to drill that same well would cost the district a couple $1 million, and I would rather them use the well that's there now.
It's already there.
I know what that well will do. There is no ifs. You know, we're in a great water table. The water quality is good. We tested that with the e-logs, and everything got documented. It's a great well.
And just for our audience to understand, that water was tested all the way down to the 1,000-foot level, right?
Yeah, they sent an e-log. What they did was went down and they cambered the casing, and it records as it goes down. It looks at water, takes water quality, and
so the water quality was good all the way down to 1,000 feet. So in this particular case, anyway, the water quality didn't decrease with depth.
No, that well actually has perforation starting at 500 feet, so it's pulling out of the bottom area, if you will. There's a kind of a clay layer when we drilled that well. We took the cuttings, and I actually made samples of it all the way down so I could look at and see exactly what was happening. And there's a clay layer in between that's probably 17 or 18 feet thick, I believe, is about what the measurements came out. It could be a little thicker, but the perforation started at 500 feet, and it's just a great well. I mean, when we test pumped it, we were getting up to 4,000 gallons a minute during the test pumping process, developing the well, getting all the mud out from the drillers, pulling that up, and actually getting the aquifer
pumped out 4,000 gallons.
4,000 gallons a minute during the test pump. And the drawdown on that, once it was developed, it started, the drawdown obviously is more because it's trying to make it work harder, because it's not, all the pores aren't opened up on the rocks.
Right.
So they have drillers' mud all packed in around.
Right.
But once it got developed, the drawdown was like 17 to 23 feet with a recharge, which I thought was incredible.
Must have
and I asked
taken months for the
I
recharge,
asked the well
or years.
drillers. It was 3 to 5 minutes, 3 minutes on average, and the recharge would come back up to static
Did you
when
hear
we
that?
quit pumping. So it was an
17
amazing.
foot drawdown, and it recharged in 3 to 4 minutes.
Yeah. It's a great well.
And this is an 18-inch well.
Yes, it's an 18-inch well.
So huge well.
It can't be. I mean, how can those that claim we're a closed system, seems like if it's a closed system, now I'm not a hydrologist, or
Nor am I.
but we got a bathtub supposedly of a basin here. You draw it down 17 feet, there shouldn't be anything coming back.
It's true.
No.
The other thing that I heard, which I was fascinated by, is that as they were putting that casing down, the casing kept trying to move.
It absolutely did move. It pushed to the south as we were dropping that casing in, because it was a larger diameter
Gremlins.
hole, obviously.
Gremlins?
Yes, gremlins were pushing.
Or
So that's why I think,
it
just
could-
with my own eyes, I've seen it push, and I've heard that's impossible. But
in a closed basin, it would be
in a closed
virtually
basin, I believe it
impossible.
would.
Other than
But I also know
drillers.
further to the south and a little bit more to the west, we have wells that are actually rising in the valley. So that tells me that the water's coming down, and it's actually increasing in those wells on the southwest portion down towards the Robbers Roost area, further down that way a little bit. And that, I believe there's a tremendous amount of water there that's untapped that I think we could use as part of our plan through the GSA, because we could use that water that isn't being used.
We had a guy by the name of Bill Manofsky on here recently. I don't know if
Correct.
you know him or not. And one of his proposals that he thought would be a good idea is, and all the particulars would have to be worked out on this, but if we could get a well field up near Little Lake area, and then one down near Walker Pass area, and develop those and tie them in, we could rotate those well fields, do 5 years on Little Lake one, and then the other two can sit vacant, and then rotate to another one. So every, what, 10 years? Or
Every 5 years.
every
it
5 years, a
But it gives
well
each
field would
field-
sit idle for 10 years.
How many seconds? Ooh, we're up against a break again.
Uh-oh.
Uh-oh.
So-
I'd like to talk about that, so when we get back,
Yeah,
we'll
when
have
we
to
get back,
discuss that.
we'll talk more about this. See you on the other side.
Welcome back, Ridgecrest Talk. Al Huey, Robert Ironman, and our special guest, Chuck Griffin, and we were talking about a possibility of some other well fields, and you wanted to comment on that.
Yeah, I think I kind of watched some of Bill's interview with you guys, and he had some good ideas. But I agree that a south field out there would be a very good idea. Up towards Little Lake, you would have your basin boundaries that we would have to worry about, especially with Sigma. It defines the basins, and the basins are defined, and unless you put in for a modification of a basin, that process is already almost closed, so it's a little past that. So that would affect the Inyo County people a little bit more. And I don't want to see us suck water from another basin if we don't have to. I mean, I don't want to affect another
Right.
basin, because I truly believe the reason our basin is in the shape it's in today is because of what happened in the early 1900s when the aqueduct was built. I think we lost a lot of our recharge. If that aqueduct wasn't built, we would have had a lot of water. So, and I think we still get a lot of water through the Little Lake Gap that comes into our basin that isn't accounted for, but that's just my
And
thought.
I don't know if you're aware of this, but I heard recently, speaking of the aqueduct, that it is tapped into.
Is tapped into by a tap.
Government.
Oh, I have no
That's
idea.
all I'll say.
Okay.
Yeah, I have
I
no idea on that.
Me either.
Just something that I heard, and it's available to government.
Huh. Okay.
Yeah, I had no
It's
idea.
not being used as far as I was informed, but it's already been tapped into. So
Okay.
I thought that was interesting.
Well, and you had mentioned that there's people who feel that there's entirely new water in this basin that has not yet been tapped.
Yeah, that's what I think. I think I think the basin's divided. I mean, we know that a lot of the water that comes in through out by Brown Road, it runs out to the playa and it divides along Lee Light or somewhere in that area. We know that. I think there's a little bit different water a little bit further north about Brown Road, where it turns and makes the hard 90 up towards the highway. You know, I know there's a lot of models out there, and everybody's models are different. But if you go out, I drilled a well there, and I seen the different effects there. I haven't told you guys this, but you know, that well we drilled on Brown Road, that was, I don't know, 5, 6 years ago, we drilled that well. And there was a tremendous amount of water there too. But even trying to get that one to seal back up was amazing because the water rushing. We had to put a lot of bentonite in there to get it to seal. It was taking water after water, and then we finally got it to seal. But it tells me there's a lot of water flowing through there. So.
And you know, the thing that somebody explained to me is that if we don't use that water, it just goes out to the playa.
It goes out to the playa, correct.
So, if nothing else, why aren't we pumping the heck out of that water and putting it in storage tanks?
Well, that's kind of been my theory. I think I said this when we first started a year ago when you guys had me on.
Water banking.
I would like to see it, if we're really worried that we're running out of water, I think that we need to pump and grab what we can right now, because I think no matter how much we use or how little we use, we're still going to get the same effect.
Right.
So, and that's why I
what
went
we
back
don't
to that
use
fallowing thing.
just goes out
I
there.
think it goes out. We're seeing a tremendous recharge in the Cantil
So
area.
and we don't have a lot of time, but okay, there's areas obviously out there that we saw in what you're saying, there's plenty of water, okay? How do we deal with the people on Brown Road that got the 350, 400-foot wells and claim that their wells are dropping like crazy?
Well, I think most of them are claiming that they're dropping a foot to a foot and a half a year. I think the best thing for people to do, if you want the information, is to, I know that the Kern County Water Agency is monitoring wells, and they're monitoring some of the ag wells too. I know the ag people have let some of that happen, and there's dual monitors in one well that I know of specifically, and it doesn't show that.
But it's not in the same area. It's further to the west, right?
Well, the one is within a half a mile or quarter a mile
Okay.
of the new alfalfa farm that was just put in on Brown Road.
Okay.
The most recent alfalfa farm, so it's right in that area.
But that well is 1,000 foot, right?
I don't know what that well is, the depth of that one. That's an existing well that was already there.
Okay.
I believe it's an 8-inch well.
Okay.
I wanted to talk about well data. A person that lives out there was kind enough to send me the data for the last 6 years. This is a corner of Coyote Trail and Bull Run, so it's in that same area. Quarter mile from one of Rod's big wells. And as was put in 2007, it's a 6-inch standard household well. And in the 6 years since they've put it in, it has dropped an entire 5.2 feet. So that's less than a foot a year. And in some years, it goes down, and in some years, it goes up. And according to the gospel, we don't have any wells that go up. Well, their well has gone up as much as 3.7 feet in a year.
Wow.
It's also dropped 3.7 feet in a year. It's gone down 1.2 feet. It's gone up 1.1 feet. So the point is it's not just a steady decline. And like I said, they're certainly close enough to be under the influence of the large ag wells.
And that has a lot to do with the testing also. You know, I don't know whose well that is or anything else, but when they test their well, it also depends on if a pump is running in the area. I mean, that can have an effect. So
Yes.
it's very important when somebody tests their well to make sure that they do it at the same time the next year or whenever they test them on a regular basis to know when everything is off, or like I was saying, the monitors, they monitor and they send data, I
Yes,
think every
right.
hour or two. So,
Right.
I mean, it gives an online average all the time, so it's there.
Boy, we're running out of time
Yep.
again.
You're going to have to come back.
Okay, I can do
We'll-
that.
We'll continue this interview down the road. We'll have Chuck back on, and we'll talk more about this water issue. But it sure sounds like we've got two completely different points of view here.
Yes. We should not be locked into the point of view that is right now in the carrying it on.
Right. All right. Good night, folks. Have a good evening. We'll see you next time here on Ridgecrest Talk.